And we're live. Hey guys, we are back. 1 second here. Oh, there we go. There we go. So we're back. I am being joined by the awesome Hal and Darren from Shard Tabletop. If you guys have questions, this is your opportunity and your chance to get those in. A lot of really cool folks would kill to have this opportunity, and I have buried a couple bodies in the back and sacrificed a chicken just to talk to you guys today. So I really appreciate it. Darren, this is the first time I've actually gotten to meet you face to face, and thank you so much for your time. And Hal, obviously, we talked a little bit in the coordination meeting, and thank you so much. You guys are both big nerds.
Yes. Yeah, that's an underestimate. We were probably that before the term was invented.
Yeah, right. So let's kind of start at the beginning. How long have you two known each other?
Let's say first day of high school, 1982. So
Really?
yeah,
Really? That's an amazing story already, just to because there's stories behind that, right?
yeah. So we ended up with a couple classes together, I guess that sophomore year of high school, and then started hanging out, playing D&D together, and kind of over the course of high school, basically,
We're
became
both,
inseparable and still aren't separable.
were both of you gamers before then as well?
I think we both started playing around 1980, Darren, something like that. We both been playing a couple of years by that point.
Yeah, that's probably about right.
Yeah, we both ended up being the dungeon masters of our middle school groups, right? I think I might have actually started even earlier, like in sixth grade or something. I don't remember, 78, 79, something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
So
one of those original starter packs for Dungeons and Dragons.
One of the old box sets, and
the
then
white box?
upgrade. Yeah.
Was it the white
upgrade
box?
to the first player's handbook and all that sort of thing.
So I was an old school D&D guy too, kind of like you guys, and you couldn't there was kind of like ways you could tell if someone was a D&D player or not sometimes just by how they dressed or how they walked around. What were the ways you guys were able to tell, or was it, hey, here's my DMG, have you seen this book before? How did you guys find each other on day one of high school and realize you were both like D&D nerds?
We're both those dudes that hung out in the back of the class and made fun of everybody else when they couldn't keep up, and all that sort of stuff. And so I don't know that on day one we knew each other were playing D&D, but certainly by the end of the second week we did.
Okay.
It wasn't that long.
Yeah.
Okay. From high school, were you always D&D players?
It's definitely gone on and off over the years. I played, during college, I played the first version of Harn Master or whatever for a while. I think I've played pretty much every edition of D&D except for third. Mostly because when third edition was out, I had really small kids and wasn't playing anything much. And traveling a bunch for work. But by the time fourth edition came out, my kids were old enough to play, and so we we're teaching them and doing that sort of thing. And then when fifth came out, we really jumped. I guess we both jumped in right about then, like 2015, something like that. Shortly after fifth edition came out, and started playing a lot again, because our kids were old enough that we could actually get out of the house and play something together.
Yeah. Darren, was that the same for you, or?
Yeah, I got a little bit after Hal started back into it, and I was looking through his books, I think, at your place when.
Yeah, exactly. Because my wife and I were playing at a local game store, right? And doing some stuff and playing. The kids were playing and all that kind of stuff. And then Darren was over and he started thumbing through some of the books, and we said, hey, if you want to join the group, go ahead. And we had a good time. And then another guy DM for a while, and then when I really got back into DMing full time, that's when the whole Shard journey started. So
yeah.
Well, it started a little before that, because as soon as we started back, I didn't want to have a paper character sheet.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And so you must have experimented with every available tool for an iPhone, an iPad, whatever else to do digital character sheets. And
I probably went through like 6 or 8 different things, and some quickly, and some I played for a little while.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll circle back to Shard here for sure. That's the main event for you guys and for us too. But I'd really like to get to know you guys before Shard. Sure. Because all those things is what went into creating it in many respects as well. Your experiences, your journey.
Yeah.
So from high school, you guys did you guys go to the same college together as well, or?
No, we went separate ways during college, but stayed in touch the whole time. Like we worked at the same place over the summer between freshman and sophomore year, and then delivering pizzas, believe it or not.
Back when you could actually do that and pay for school.
Yeah, when you could actually do that, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And then hanging out and that sort of stuff, and then Darren was at North Carolina State. I was at in Western Kentucky at Kentucky Wesleyan. We were both studying computer science, so we were in touch a lot. And then occasionally he would intern in Lexington, where we grew up, and we get together and hang out. And so it was all summers and all that. And then as soon as we both graduated, we started doing summer vacations together for a few years, because he moved out right after college here to the Pacific Northwest, where we both live now, and we started going on vacation. Our wives and us would go on vacations together, right, and spend a week or more during the summer hanging out and that sort of stuff. So
was that hanging out?
And then in '94, he convinced me to come to Microsoft, where he had been since 1990, and the rest is history. We've been in the same town ever since. So
like Bellevue, the town that Microsoft built.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I live in Sammamish, and he lives in North Bend, so we're both, not too far from Redmond, where the Microsoft World headquarters is.
Yeah. I used to have to go out there at least 1 week every month when I did some work for a different company out there.
Yeah, I think in '94 when I moved here, the tallest building in Bellevue was like the Hyatt Hotel or something. At 18 stories, and it was the only one over about 5 stories, I think. And now I think there are, how
innumerable skyscrapers.
I mean, it's like a glass city, basically. It's like, it's incredible the amount of buildings that have been built there over the years.
Some of the best sushi I've ever had was in that town.
We've got basically Asian food of every variety, not just sushi or Japanese, but like Thai food, Chinese, everything is incredible here.
Good pho as well.
Yeah, Vietnamese. There's a pho place like literally a mile and a half from my house here. So
yeah. So you guys both started on the East Coast, and then you both moved to the Pacific Northwest.
We both grew up in Lexington, Kentucky. Yeah.
Oh, wow, Lexington, Kentucky. So the Seattle freeze and all that other stuff notwithstanding, how was that adjustment for you guys? I mean, because not long after that, Wizards was big, and Wizards acquired TSR. Was that big for you guys as well? I mean, to have it in your backyard?
Well, I don't think it had a huge influence at being here in the backyard like at the time, but obviously over the years, we got to know some of the people that were involved and either directly or peripherally. And like what's really been interesting is, being here where it is now, doing what we're doing, is so many of the other companies are here too. So like Cobalt Press is here. Wolfgang lives right in Kirkland, and the Pathfinder guys are down in Redmond, and there's you name it. Like there's so many
Privateer
other
Press as well, and a couple of companies.
in Woodinville, right? And absolutely. There's just a ton of them that are within 30 miles of our house or whatever, right? In the greater sort of Seattle metropolitan area, there's just tons and tons of gaming companies.
Although you remember when we were first started at Microsoft, we were playing a lot of Magic the Gathering.
Which was, and Wizards actually had local, like they had their own version of local stores over in the university district and, that sort of stuff. I actually held a ship party for one of my groups at one of their, like it had these big clubs that were like arcades basically. So Magic the Gathering and you name it, all kinds of stuff going on at that thing.
Yeah, I started playing Magic in 1995, I think it was.
Yeah, I was playing even before that because I was playing in Kentucky before I moved out here. Yeah. So
that was
I've got boxes of the cards from like the what the original Dark Ages set and all of the sets in the early 90s. So tons of them.
Yeah.
One day I'll dig those out and, finance my retirement on what people will pay for Magic cards these days.
Well, there's been a huge surge. I actually did a news thing, kind of an editorial op-ed on people were buying up all these Pokemon and Magic cards, and they were literally raising the prices of all the cards across the board. Magic's a lot more fluid. I don't think it raised it as much, but in Pokemon's case, it absolutely did. Yeah. But people were like, "Well, should we shift our pensions over to that?" And I'm like, "No, please, for the love of all that's holy, don't do that." Yeah,
well, we've got a few collectible hobbies because we're also both into wine. So we got I got a huge cellar full of wine. So does Darren. That's their stuff. And so people try to make that an investment too. They're like, oh, let me buy Bordeaux futures or whatever. It's like, really? No. It's like, I only buy what I'm going to drink.
Well, certain commodities can have some opportunities, but trying to invest into Beanie Baby futures is not on the list of things. For me to do,
exactly. Or sports cards, or you name it.
And the other thing that we try to explain is whereas people are saying it's worth that price, try finding a buyer who's willing to pay for it.
Right.
So
that's right.
It's more like gambling than it is.
It is. Yeah. It is. It absolutely is.
That card was worth that to Wayne Gretzky because the $1 million doesn't mean anything to him, but like any other buyer isn't going to pay that for it.
Exactly. As you guys shifted and you grew up and you were in technology, you were always into. Now you're both programmers, code writers.
We both started that way, though Darren stayed a lot closer to it than I did over the course of his career. So we both started as coders. In fact, my first job out of college, I was doing process control and industrial equipment, and so like very low level code that machine code. That had like budgets in microseconds for how long the execution cycle could be because of the piece of equipment it was controlling. That sort of stuff.
Yeah, so. Output and all that other stuff. It cost dollars. So.
Yeah, and Darren was did a bunch of internships and then started at Microsoft in 1990 straight out of college. So he's done a bunch of great projects at Microsoft.
So, as you guys continued to develop, were you had that? You already mentioned that there was some time periods where you had to step away from the tabletop gaming on a consistent basis. What other games besides Magic were you playing that may have influenced, where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, you name it. I mean, like every board game imaginable, Risk, Monopoly. As kids, I just if we turn my camera around here, you'll see under the pool table over here a stack of board games that are include Catan and Small World and King of Tokyo and you name it, like all kinds of crazy stuff. That's right. And we've played them all. I guess the one we play most consistently now is Dominion, Darren, probably is the most consistent.
Probably.
Dominion's a great board game. Great board game.
Yeah. Just the infinite variety of cards available for that thing. It's in some ways similar to Magic in that it's a deck building game, but it's a deck building game in a very different way, right? It's everybody's pulling from the same pool of cards and you have to basically figure out the strategy line through the board fairly quickly. It's not like how many years can I spend building the perfect deck, right? By collecting them. It's literally at the beginning of every game, you got to assess the board and say, okay, what's the fastest line through this board that's going to get me to a victory condition? Yeah. So it's a strategist game for sure. And then
I feel the same way about Settlers of Catan. It's a game you start with family and friends and end with everyone that you hate.
Yeah, exactly. Or everyone that hates you if you're good at it.
Yeah, vice versa. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I think I'm looking over. I think I've got the Star Trek edition of Catan, sitting over there. So
Oh yeah. Set phasers to torture. Yeah,
exactly. And then a few of the D&D derivative game boards, Castle Ravenloft, and that sort of stuff. So Munchkin, the card game. Right? I played that a lot with the kids when they were little.
I'm a big fan of Munchkin. I love it. I've had nothing but entertainment with the innuendos and the silliness of the game.
We've got the Cthulhu edition and a few of the other expansions for it, and sometimes we'll just mix them all up and play some a massive draw with all these crazy combinations, and it's yeah.
I believe Steve Jackson has actually helped another charity I worked with called Operation Supply Drop, and they donated a whole bunch of games to the troops to deliver over, so the troops would have some games, because it's actually, everybody wants video games and stuff, they say, and then you get overseas and you realize, well, I can't exactly plug it into a hill in the desert.
Exactly.
Especially if you need internet access. Getting good internet access is a challenge as well over there. So.
And sometimes a game that makes noise is not exactly good in enemy territory. Whereas a card game you can play quietly is fine.
If you're playing cards, then you're already making too much noise if you're worried about stealth at that point. But because people are, especially if you're playing Munchkin, because you're trying to kill everybody else. And again, it's a game you start with people who your friends and family, and by the end of it, everybody hates each other. It's a wonderful game.
Yeah.
Seems like that might be a theme for the kind of games you like, John.
No, not at all, not at all. Actually, go ahead, Darren. You were going to say something.
I'm saying we've also played a bunch of video games over the years too.
Oh yeah.
Talk me through some of the video games you guys have played, because I know that influences you guys as well.
I think that like the console one that we started with was PlayStation 2.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of Crash Bandicoot, and
aren't those fun games?
Yeah, that sort of stuff. And then, God, even before that, like going back to what was the one we spent hours in the arcade with in high school, like the Gyrus, right? That sort of stuff. We could both beat it from start to finish, right? That sort of stuff. We'd literally stand there for hours playing on one quarter, sort of thing, right?
Joust. Do you remember Joust?
Yeah, played that one.
Yeah.
What was it? Robotron that you could do cooperative? I think that was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Spent many a quarter in an arcade. My dad actually fixed arcade systems on the side. So he worked with an arcade company and fixed their systems occasionally. And so I remember one night he loaded up a pickup truck with 6 full-size arcade systems and brought them over to the house. Yeah. And he had a party with all these people, and he says, "Hey, look, we can come play video games." And I remember the living room had Asteroids and Galaga and all these different amazing games, and I just sat there as a 4-year-old mashing buttons like my life depended on it.
So the first building Darren and I worked in at Microsoft was it's connected to 2 other buildings by sky bridges, right? So it's building 16 on the campus. It connects to both 17 and 18 by sky bridge, right? And that kind of stuff. And essentially by the mid to late 90s, arcade games, at least the classic ones, were already in decline, right? And so basically, a bunch of people had bought them up, right, and filled those tubes between the buildings with these things. And so sometime in the middle of your 12 or 16-hour day, you just go out there and play a video game for a half hour or whatever else, and come back, right? It's it just. And that and mini golf in the hallways were probably the 2 most advanced forms of recreation at Microsoft at that time.
Yeah. The life of living and working at a tech company, and I do mean living in some cases.
Oh, we definitely lived there the first few years. The first 2 years I was out here, I think we were both working 100 hours a week.
Oh my goodness.
What was the joke at the time? We only work half days, any 12 hours you want.
That's exactly right. Any 12 hours you want.
Oh,
as long as you do it 7 days, only 7 days a week, you're fine.
Oh my goodness, breakneck pace. You had to love the work, I hope, or at least
we did.
Love
And
what you got paid for.
Growing so much at the time, it was just a lot of fun to see the impact the products were having in market and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just the year I joined, 94, Microsoft had just reported $5 billion in revenue or something. And the next year the goal was 8. So you can imagine being a $5 billion company that's going to grow 60%. Nobody'd ever done it before.
Insane growth for most companies that are
literally
already that big.
Nobody'd ever done it before, right? And so and actually a few years later, after the DOJ suit settled up and so forth in the early 2000s, in 2003, the SEC leveled a fine at Microsoft was the first time ever somebody had been fined for underreporting revenue, because in the period of 95, 96, 97 or whatever else, they underreported revenue because they were reserving too much, in the SEC's opinion, against future liabilities for maintenance of the software. That was, of course, during the Windows 95, Office 95 period, when revenue was just skyrocketed.
Ridiculous, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the year they made $8 billion, I think the SEC said they underreported by $1 billion. So they actually went from 5 to 9 in 1 year.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah.
Shifting forward to modern 5e play, when you guys got started with 5e, you said it was like 2015, if I recall from my notes here.
For me it was. I think Darren was about a year later, something like that.
Oh,
yeah.
Darren. So why did it take you a year longer, Darren?
He's got kids that are younger than mine.
So how many kids do you guys have?
I've got 3.
3?
Yeah, he has 3. I have 2, and his youngest one is like the thing that lagged him by a year.
Okay.
Our older ones are basically the same ages.
Okay.
In fact, his middle one and my younger one are a month apart, basically.
That's awesome. I have 5. They're all amazing. And
5.
I think
Time to do anything?
Huh?
With 5 combined, and I can't imagine.
Well, they do spend some time at their mother's in Kansas, so but when they're with me, it's all about them. It's really hard to do anything else and not want to spend time with them when you don't see them all the time. But
yeah, absolutely.
But even when they're here, I mean, half the time what we try to do is go have fun and play games because I don't get to see them as often as I'd like. So that's why I do those things with them. And then, because, I mean, who wants to see, hey, let's go to work with Dad? I did that a few times with them. They didn't enjoy that at all. So, let's go rehab a house. That's so much not fun for them. So,
Yeah, exactly.
They were a little more excited to come and play the video games when I was at Microsoft.
Yeah. So in 2015, 2016, really just as things were switching to 5e and really getting ramped up, you guys got started in 5e. How was that as if it was similar to me, I'm curious, how was that for you guys coming into 5e and seeing that game system and running it?
So the simplicity of 5e actually reminded me of the early days of, to me, it was almost nostalgic rather than all the, rules bloat that had come in 3 and all the other stuff. It was almost nostalgic to go back to a game that was, in my mind, much simpler and much more left things in the hands of the game master, as opposed to, there's a rule on book 43 on page 82 that says this combination and that combination are perfect together.
That sounds like Roll Master.
It just felt much simpler, right?
Yeah.
And for me, that was super appealing, right?
So what about Darren? Did you notice the smoothness difference in terms of the reversed armor class and stuff like that? I mean, was the new adoption? I mean, it had the nostalgia of the old D&D. It had a smooth and elegant math behind it. I think that was similar to, they brought in some of the same guys from Magic, who I think also helped work on some of the rule sets. I don't know for sure, but it just seemed to evoke that same
for me it was easy to pick up, having played, advanced D&D. If anything, there were a few things gone, right? Like, not having a big dungeon master's guide with as much detail for play, which was kind of more in the player's handbook. It was, pretty quick to pick up and I think get started playing.
Did you find your play of style had changed from 5e versus the old school D&D?
I think that was more due to
maturity.
I've changed.
Maturity. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd see where you are in your life. I think more than anything else, right? I think if we were still teenagers, we'd probably play just as badly as we did then in terms of. But,
I think the one big thing that was kind of led us to where we are was just the trying to spend less time flipping through books and shuffling papers, and to be able to really focus on when we're playing, what's happening in the story, how is that going, how do we interact with each other, and really, enjoying the storytelling and the kind of human interaction parts of what's going, and the puzzle solving and those types of things, rather than the kind of the technical, where am I going to store this thing and how do I remember that, and all of those types of details.
Did you find that, because I know that sometimes when we're teenagers, it's all about the combat and proving yourself and stuff like that too. Did that wash away as well as you've grown?
I think even then we like puzzles and stuff. Like there were a lot more
Yeah.
puzzles in our games even back then, puzzles and traps and so forth. Then,
Okay.
but probably a lot less role playing. Yeah, it was a lot more defeat this series of things. When we were a kid.
Solve the issue. Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's like overcome this trap. Fight this monster. That sort of stuff. The only the barest thread of a storyline was there, but like. I think the longest campaign we ran when we were, like I was the GM, we ran all the way through the G series, the D series, all the way up to Q1, right? So we ran a lot of other modules, like one-off, occasionally write our own, do whatever. But like I think of the written series, that was by far the longest series we ran, and that was a lot of fun, though. Going from the beginning of that to the end.
So
but I think that there's one thing though is. Even today, I think compared to some people, we still enjoy a good combat.
Yeah,
oh yeah, well, I mean that challenge is always there if it's done right.
Yeah. My wife is like any excuse to throw a fireball, right?
Oh, all right, okay. So it's the family that fireballs together stays together. I see.
She would just as soon every caster in the group have fireballs, so that you just obliviate anything. Like. Don't get in the way, barbarian, because we're about to destroy all these things.
Absolutely. From your perspective, you started in around 2015, 2016. How long before you started saying, hey, we want a digital solution to this?
Late 2018, probably. You were experimenting with character sheets even before then, but the time we started writing code.
Talk me through the character sheets.
Well, I was mostly trying variety of stuff. So D&D Beyond, Fight Club.
Mm-hmm.
There were probably 2 or 3 others that I played with creating characters and trying it and then getting frustrated and moving on to the next thing. So, but I think that by the time we started working on this, I refused to use a paper character sheet, even though I was annoyed every time with the tools.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, yeah, I mean, you'd been using a paper character or a digital character sheet of some kind for probably a year and a half before we actually started writing tools of our own. And it started out as a very simple problem, right? Which was, I don't want to spend a half hour drawing on a battle map. I want to be able to digitally put a map up and either put our miniatures on it or tokens of some kind on top, or use digital tokens, one or the other, right? Didn't much matter. And so we started actually, like, we looked at Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds and Arkenforge and you name it, else that was around at the time, right? And frankly, all of them were just super clunky, right? For doing something really simple, right? And so we just wrote one, right? Darren spent one weekend writing one.
As the ultimate nerd, I'm always have something I would be coding with on the side. So that became my, let's go try this. And it kind of, started to mushroom pretty quickly.
Yeah. So he'd code it. The next night we'd play it, and then we'd say, okay, it'd be nice if it had this and this. And, eventually it was, well, it'd be great if the players could move their own tokens on the board so the game master didn't have to move all the tokens. So now we're going to have a device in the player's hands. Okay, well, if we're going to have a device in the player's hands, why not merge that with the character sheet? And it just mushroomed from there.
So features and benefits would all increase as you got feedback literally in your own games.
Initially, just all in our own games, right? And then when it got to the state where it had, I don't know, maybe a third of what it's got today, right?
Oh, maybe not even that.
Right? When it had all the rudimentary pieces working, friends would say, hey, can we use this tool for our own games? And so we essentially invented a way to, for them to log in and create their own, instance effectively in the cloud.
A shard, right? If you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which kind of got started because I was curious and playing around with some of the Google Firebase stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the original version was written in Heroku using Firebase as the back end, right? So like it.
Wow.
And,
Circling back to something you said, Darren, you said something about you refused to play with a paper character sheet. Can you tell me what caused that for you? Like you wanted to use an electronic character sheet. What was the impetus for that?
So my experience with the paper character sheet is that it just becomes a huge distraction from play.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to, what are my capabilities and what is the value for this, and especially with a spellcaster, what are my spells and how many spell slots, and what is the bonus that goes with it, and flipping through the books to look up information and find that. So being able to have that kind of in one spot where I can kind of quickly look it up and just spend less time with the kind of bookkeeping and more time actually playing was my main goal.
So it kept the game more gamey as opposed to less of that. But with some VTTs, I find that I'm not playing Dungeons and Dragons. I'm playing Let's Build This VTT. And not to take away from some of those, because they created something that's awesome for those groups that did that, and some are still around, and they're great. Shard is the kind of the new big kid on the block in many ways, and meaningfully so. What is it that did you guys ever decide, hey, we wanted to make sure this was going to flow smoothly, or is that part of your process, or?
Always has been, right? If it's not easier to do in the tool, then it's not worth doing, right? Like, so it has to be easy. And one of the reasons we embraced 5e as a system is not just because that's the dominant system we play with, right? And that kind of stuff. I mean, originally it was that, but it was also, so one of the reasons that the systems you're talking about are so hard to use is because they try to be system agnostic. They try to not encode any of the behavior of the system into their base primitives. So basically they rely on somebody to write scripts on top that basically implement even basic primitives of the game. Things like rolling with advantage or adding a modifier or whatever else are all script written on top of their platform, not actually the code in the platform itself doesn't understand any of that, right? And so when we set out to do the character sheet, it was like, no, we're going to code a 5e character sheet from the ground up that actually understands the mechanics of proficiency and understands the what modifier to add to this role or that role, and all that sort of stuff. And like it made everything simpler, right? To have one core mechanic. And even now, like as we embrace more publishers that each have their own kind of variation of 5e rules, it turns out to be super simple to adapt it to extensions like Cthulhu, right, and so forth. It has a separate mechanic for Insanity and Dread and formula casting and those things, and those kinds of extensions we're just adding on top of the core thing. And like we never ask a user to write any code. Like there's never a point the user writes any code.
Wow, that sounds really nice. I did have a question here from the folks in chat here. Question: I'm liking what I see of Shard so far. What was your design philosophy when designing Shard, considering the existence of other VTT options like Foundry and Roll20?
Okay. So first principle was we didn't want you to ever have to set up any software. Right. It had to be as simple as type a URL and start. Right. So there was you were never going to not install a piece of software, and you were never going to write any software in order to play the game. Right. Second principle is it had to work on every device, because we wanted to be able to sit around, at the time we were playing in person, and as the game master, I was using a PC, but like most of the players had their phones in their hands or a tablet. Right. So it had to work on every device. Right. If it required separate programming for different devices, then we knew we were and we've done this many times with commercial software. Anytime somebody says, oh yeah, I'm going to do a version for the PC and a different version for the phone, you're in feature hell. Like you're never going to catch up, right? In terms of one will always be ahead of the other.
Feature hell. I love that. I'm gonna use that for other things in my life.
Right. That's exactly right. So it had to be one piece of code that would run on all the devices, right? And that sort of stuff. And so, Darren was already playing with Firebase as a storage thing. It happens to support some really interesting primitives for things like caching and all that sort of stuff. So like it's super fast, it can run offline. We experimented with a couple different web frameworks. He can walk you through that process to what he eventually chose on that front. And like, it just had to be. So that's like the technology primitives. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of it had to be simple. Like it had to be easier for somebody to use, certainly easier than paper and pencil, right? Mm-hmm. Like it just had to be easier than that, right? For the player, right? And it had to be intuitive enough that a new player could sit down and learn it in a very quick period of time, right? If we ever find something, like we take feedback from our Discord and Facebook user groups all the time about, when somebody says, well, how do I, and we went, well, here's how you do it, but how would you prefer it happen? Right?
Mm-hmm. Like more than one way to do the same task.
Yeah. What would have been more intuitive for you, right? Like what would have been, better? Had we done it this way, would it have been better, right? And a lot of the, enhancements you've seen to the character sheet and to other things, like we've been, obviously with the launch of the marketplace yesterday, we've been super busy, getting all the new content creators on board, and on both on content creation features and on marketplace features over the last, say, couple months, mm-hmm. right? That's been the top priority, right, to get things launched. And now we've got a nice backlog of things that are like, okay, enhancements to the player features that, have been contributed by our community over the last, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months, or whatever else, that literally today we're sitting down and going, okay, I really don't like the way this looks. Let's fix this, right? Okay, we're going to change some of the navigation on the character sheet to be easier to get between different parts. Mm-hmm. Oh, we're going to display, things in a different way here to make it more intuitive, right? And so we're just continually refining like that.
There's been some things, in terms of kind of keeping the tool out of the way, like where you get some intersection with technology. So mm-hmm. one of the things we wanted was whatever we did, we wanted it to be very responsive. Mm-hmm. So we didn't want to have these kind of delays between I do this and then I wait and then it comes back and then I do my next thing. So we, as a result, kind of hit the in between of creating a real app and having it be a web application, mm-hmm. in that almost all the code runs offline and on the client rather than at the server. And it's only really small amounts of data that go back and forth. So as a result, we can keep the user experience very snappy and very quick to get things done without having these kind of latency delays where I'm going back and forth to the web or the internet to try to do stuff. So
dice rolling isn't done at the client, but results eventually go back as needed if it's going to create a permanent change. But if it's just something that's temporary, it's not something you'd leave there, right?
Yeah, the die roll gets executed on the client and goes into the dice tray locally, and then it gets communicated as shared state to the rest of the players that are a part of that game.
So they know the number, but they didn't have to do the number crunching to watch the die roll. Very good.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they actually get the string that says, you got a D8 that was a 5 plus, whatever the modifier was, and it displays, right? And so it re-renders on their side, right? So none of it was ever server side rendered.
Another thing that I think has been big with, as we were doing content and content creation, is we wanted to have a system where all of the kind of core classes, races, abilities are done through a generic modeling. So you don't have to write code, but that you can do everything. And that we have pretty much held true to not having back doors to make things happen. So if we go to implement a new class feature or a race feature and it's not currently supported, we don't go build a special implementation. We figure out how we can model that generically, and then we build that feature, and then we go build the race or the class or whatever using that. So as a result, the set of things that you can do has grown as we've continued to expand and as we continue to move forward with other stuff. But it means that you can go and create all sorts of interesting combinations that go well beyond what we initially came up with.
Yeah. So, for example, spell casting is a great example of that, right? So you have a few different spell casting, like in fifth edition, you have full casters, half casters, third casters, and literally on the modeling dialogue for class, if you're creating a new class that wants to be a spellcaster, it says choose. Are you a full caster, half caster, and it like assigns spell slots accordingly.
So it maintains that balance built into
Maintains
the system
the game balance, right, and that sort of stuff. So it basically does that. It also understands pack magic, so you can assign a pack magic feature. In fact, one of the features on the board right now we're getting ready to do is the half pack magic, because there's one of the blood hunter classes that's not an official class, but people love it. So we're modeling half packed magic as a feature for one of the subclasses of blood hunter, right? Where you get half the number of slots you would if you were a full warlock. And that one of the ones we were talking about earlier today, right, is the fact that, okay, so what if I multi-class from warlock to blood hunter, or vice versa? Well, how many pack slots do I get? Well, you get half your blood hunter level plus your because it's a half warlock, right? So like multi-classing basically naturally just understands how to make it happen.
That sounds like a lot of math.
Yeah, well, it is. The core game is a lot of math, but it's not. It turns out to be no math that the user has to do. The engine kind of understands what a half caster is, right? It understands what half pack magic it is. It understands what that sort of stuff is,
and
right?
And you build it. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
From your perspective, now that you're up and running, you just got your shop up and running.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys running on full all 8 cylinders and looking to buy a V12 and make it even beefier? What are you guys looking at in terms of Shard is here, and there's no way that Shard's not going to be here for a while, because you guys have already a massive amount of support from all these third-party groups that are putting out content, and they're putting it ready to go for your platform.
Yep.
What's the next thing that you guys? I mean, like, are you guys able to keep up with all this?
Yeah.
You guys just crack your knuckles and you spend a weekend and you've got the next 3 months done, or I mean, like, how does that work for you guys?
Not quite. This is both our full-time gig now, so we're both sort of retired from any other commercial gig. Like, we do a few set on a few boards and do a few commercial things, but this is our almost full-time retirement gig now, and so it's not just a weekend job. And there, particularly when it comes to content conversion and working with the other creators, there's a staff beyond us that helps with that sort of stuff, right? And so last week I sat down and converted this thing over. Over, and you saw it in the marketplace Monday, and that literally I got the contents of that book in a digital format on Thursday, and it was ready for the market on Monday.
Wow. So you guys are putting it out there.
Yeah, and
don't forget, you might want to mention the most important person in your life, Hal, that helps with that. What's
my daughter is like literally the one that runs all the conversions, and she got a nice surprise yesterday in that one of the upcoming books that we're converting that's going to press simultaneously, we're going to release the Shard version for Cobalt Press. Her name is actually in the book, right? And so she was like, bouncing off the walls yesterday, excited about the fact that Cobalt Press loved her enough with the work she's doing for them to actually put her name in the book.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
And it's, she's one of these super detail oriented people that, like, she literally, as we were converting some of their old books, would generate, 2 or 3 pages of errors and omissions that she found as she was converting it, and going, okay. And like, they just hired a new managing editor there, and Thomas has been great. He like takes her feedback and turns it around and goes, okay, here's what we want to do to fix each one of these things up, right? And works with the designers and all that sort of stuff. So she's literally become a member of the Cobalt Press team.
That's awesome that the integration is that tight and the transparency is that clean.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No, we strive. I mean, like, we have, especially with the, even some small publishers, right, that have pushed us, have been great, right, to work with, in terms of we've been working closely with, our very first content partner was Underground Oracle, and it's literally a 2-person team that's cranking out
who those folks are,
for 5e, right, and they do amazing stuff. Jess and Keith are awesome, and so we've worked closely with them for almost a year now.
Yeah,
right? It's and they helped organize some of the first public playtest games for us, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, we're pretty tight with our content community, and that's one of the reasons we have no trouble recruiting new ones, right? It's like, they get just how much we care about them being successful on our platform.
Is that a big part of the philosophy that you guys have? Is it's not just because you're trying to put something together and generate a cash flow. It's because you actually care about the games and the people behind them.
Yeah, this is like compared to, working at a career at Microsoft or something like that. This is probably never generate the kind of money that we did in the prime of our careers and that kind of stuff, right? It's never been about the money. It's about the love of the game, and it's about seeing this community, create. Like we literally, have pricing that like is, our cheapest subscription is like $20 a year, right? And includes a whole bunch of content that we're, both some stuff we created and some stuff we're licensing, right? And that sort of stuff. It's not a SKU that's going to make a ton of money for us, but it provides a whole bunch of value to the user, right? And that sort of stuff. So it's like, our goal is to grow a community, not to try to make a bunch of money.
Did your release and publication of your system get accelerated because of the pandemic? Did that help launch it in a meaningful? I mean, like everybody's playing remotely now. I can't think of a better time to launch a remote gameplay system.
So it didn't figure into how we thought about the timeline for what we were doing, but it did. I think we did. Like when we took it live May 1st of last year in the in the initial beta version, live around that time, we were shocked how many people jumped on it like immediately. Right. And like with almost no advertising, just all word of mouth. Right. There were, thousands of people. Right. By the time we kicked off the Kickstarter this January, there were, well over 10,000 people. And today there are well over 20,000 people. Right. That are, and it's almost all word of mouth. Like we did, late last fall in prep for the commercial launch, we did, a small amount of Facebook and search advertising, but like small, right? Like don't think, not even tens of thousands of dollars, like that, barely thousands of dollars have been spent, right?
Single digit dollars a day.
Yeah.
And
I'm familiar with Facebook Pixel. I've had to leverage that in the past before. So
yeah, we don't even leverage that, right? Yeah. None of because we refuse to track and invade people's privacy. Right. And that sort of stuff. So we didn't even install the Pixel on our site or in the app or anything else. It's like, it's 100% just, we targeted the US role-playing audience and that sort of stuff. And that's been the other thing is like,
oh, how'd you do that without Pixel? That's interesting. We'll have to talk offline about that sometime.
Facebook targets it themselves within the contents that are on site.
Okay.
So,
okay. You guys are teaching me something new here.
Yeah. You don't have to have the Pixel to do that. So yeah, there's because they know like what your expressed interests are if you're a part of an RPG group or whatever else. That's the way it works. But yeah, it's.
I'd like you to hear something from Chad. It's like they definitely get that this is our passion vibe from you guys, and they think it's very cool.
Cool.
So.
Yeah. It is right. This is. It makes me extremely happy when a new content creator reaches out and says, "Hey, I've been, I've got this one thing, like whether they're, obviously, the big creators are market makers, like somebody like Cobalt Press or Peterson Games or Nord, or these guys, these are market makers, right? They can drive hundreds of users to us, but it makes me just as happy when some guy that's published his very first module, like, reaches out. Like one of the things I'm happiest about in our Kickstarters, we funded the guy that moderates our Discord, wrote his very first module, and he did a great job. It's got fantastic art. It's really well written and all that kind of stuff. And we funded that module and paid him to have it be a reward for all our Kickstarters. So now there's hundreds of people that have that module in their hands, and he's selling units every day now in the marketplace, and he's ecstatic about it, right? And he's a first-time creator, right? Never written anything before, right? And so those kinds of stories make me just as happy as, working with Cobalt Press or Nord or the other guys.
Yeah, this is one of the things I think that, from a creator point of view is trying to give great tools for all of the amazing third-party producers out there that are doing stuff, right? It's, Wizards of the Coast gets a lot of special treatment just because they're so big and result, not everyone gets the same treatment, especially with kind of some of the other marketplaces and that type of stuff. So, us being able to help that community be successful is actually really important to us, right? Which is why, we don't have any exclusive, listings with us, and we want people to be as successful as they can. And
not only do we not have anything like an exclusive listing, like we never sort of incent somebody in a way that says, oh, we'll give you a bigger share of the revenue or lower our marketplace fee if you don't list it anyplace else. Like there's none of that going on. It's like we charge a fair price for what service we provide in the market and that kind of stuff. And we want you to keep as much of the money and reinvest it in your products, or feed your family, or whatever you're trying to do with.
Put more on Shard so that more people want to use it. That's a win for everyone, right?
Yeah, more. I mean, like we know that, hey, great tools only go so far. Great content is what carries the game forward, right? And so, look, we're trying. Our goal was to save every game master a lot of time and get more people playing the game. Well, having a great set of prepackaged content is one way to do that, right? So if I can sit down and play a one shot that's like incredibly well written and great art, or I can start a new campaign as big as Empire of Ghouls and have literally hundreds of monster tokens and all the maps laid out, and literally it's click on an encounter and activate it. If all that can just happen, like then the game masters, basically they have to know the premise of the game and a few key facts, and they can jump in and run the game.
Yeah,
wow.
That is one of the feedback I love seeing in our various places. Is I've never DM'd before, and I tried it and it went great.
Yeah.
Wow. And on the tool too, because that can be a challenge with that.
So some of them are, I'd never used an online tool, or I'd tried another tool and failed, or whatever else. But some of them are literally, I'd never tried to be a game master before, right? I'd never sat down and done it. And I got so confident with your tool as a player that I thought, well, I can do this, right? And they were successful, and they did it, right? And that sort of stuff. And then, the other ones we get notes. You talk about pandemic, or people are like, you guys saved my game. I had 3 games that had been on hiatus for an indefinite period of time until I discovered your tool, and it was just so easy that we're all up and running now. Like all 3 games are back, right? And that sort of stuff. I
think that was the biggest thing that the pandemic shifted for us, was to understand the online centric play as much as the in-person, because a lot of Shard started out, our assumption was that you would mostly use it in person to play,
because that's what you were doing at the time.
Yeah, and we would put it on the TV, and we would sit down and use that as our virtual game board, or sit around the table doing it. And there were a bunch of things that we learned, mostly by listening to feedback from other people about what we needed with it. And that one of the things that when we first started out is we didn't really care for digital dice, because we were playing in person. Those physical dice were part of the game flow. But once you're playing online remote, it has a different feel to it. And someone gave us great feedback. They're like, look, I can roll the dice, I can tell you what I rolled, but it's just a lot nicer to be able to see what people are rolling as they're rolling. And that was a big light switch for us to go and, hey, we need to have digital dice. And we went and used that to, pivot and change it. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from people about what's working, what's not working. And, that I think is, a lot of where Shard has gotten isn't just, we made some brilliant decision. It was, listening to people giving us feedback and saying, hey, it would be nice if it did this, or why is this way? And, trying to, learn from that.
How does that feedback loop work now? Do people just email it in, or do they click a button, say, please add feature? Or
we've got a wish list on our Discord server that, you can go up and put anything you want on the wish list. And if we don't understand what it is, one of us will jump on and ask questions about, okay, what do you mean? How would this be better? All that sort of stuff. Or one of the moderators or other members of the community will say, hey, we think about it this way. And when they kind of done that, we harvest the best stuff off that list and put it into the tool.
So you have a never-ending.
Really, just one thing, right? Like, we watch all of our channels: Facebook, Reddit, Discord, emails, and some of it is, we get wish list. Hey, I wish it would do this. Some of it is just, I can't figure out how to do this, or how does this work, or can you do this, right? And just engaging with people to try and figure it out. And one of the things that we really try to do with that's nice through these kind of real-time communications is, it's not just, hey, I'd like feature X, but we can turn around and say, hey, what are you doing with that? Why do you want that? And when we can figure out how to build it in a way that's going to integrate and go with it. And, sometimes we do exactly what people asked for. In other cases, we kind of dig a couple levels deep and figure out, we really need to solve this kind of more fundamental thing instead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, guys, this has been a very enriching conversation for me and for the audience. I know that I'm excited to get to know you guys a lot better and see so much more about what your philosophy was behind this, and as well as the human beings that are real and flesh and blood that make this possible. And I know that there are thousands of people now who are thankful for the work that you've put in. If you guys get a chance, we're gonna do our quick little drawing. If you could hang on for just a moment, we're gonna pick our winner for their contest, and from there, all right, Dura Bora, and Wizard of DC have both won the contest. We'll reach out to both of you guys here shortly. Congratulations on winning the giveaway from Overhead Games, gentlemen. Thank you again so much for coming out. If there's anything we can do for you, we'd love to talk with you some more. And everyone else, you'll see this one on YouTube in about 48 hours, and then a separate interview will be edited out just for that within a day or two after that as well. Be sure and check us out next week on the Games Tavern Happy Hour at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And then also check us out tomorrow as the Velkin Weave starts their live action role play as well. So see you guys soon. See you guys next week.